Welcome to Talkin Science. Matt Miller with you. Today, a white dwarf found with a giant planet orbiting every 1.4 days. Astronomers say it's like looking into our future. A reality show is coming which will see contestants vie for a place on a 2023 Dragon ride to the space station. And an Aussie first, Southern Launch shoots a rocket to the edge of space, proving we're well on our way to sovereign launch capabilities. We're back on Tuesdays. It's September 22, 2020. Those stories, plus the headlines, coming up on today's show.
Beaming around the world with the latest science and space news on Facebook Watch, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is Talkin Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And we're back on Tuesdays. It's Talkin Science with Dr. Brad Tucker. Brad, happy Tuesday.
How's it going?
I've missed saying happy Tuesday, Brad. So I thought, why not? I'm in control of Trekzone here, so why not put it back on Tuesdays where we belong, where we have been for over a year now, Talkin Science.
Yeah, the originals are the best.
Exactly right. Well, and the originals for you are your social medias. On Twitter, @btucker22. On Facebook, Dr. Brad Tucker. I'm on Twitter as well, @MirrorMatt86. I almost forgot my own handle there. And Trekzone all over social media as well. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Brad, time to dive into the headlines.
Talking Science headlines.
And first up, Brad, a skincare commercial is going to be shot in space.
Yeah, look, a bit different here. They're sending up 10 bottles of night cream, I think it is called, to have it float around and take photos and videos so that then they can make a commercial out of it. It's quite interesting, NASA 5-6 years ago was very against anything commercialized, even private people going to the space station. Now it's all completely changed. So it's almost getting like race car drivers, you could imagine, where some company may be sponsoring them in the future. Look, I guess it means if there's more private investment around, less taxpayer money or whatever for that needs to be spent on it. So diversifying your income, but definitely different.
And I think this one's interesting as well, that they're actually going to be tasking NASA astronauts with the beauty shots, the product shots of Estee Lauder's range here. I wonder if that was ever included in the mission brief for a new astronaut.
Yeah, look, usually they don't train to shoot commercials. I'll tell you that much. So that's going to be one of those interesting job requests that come up and like, okay, I guess we're doing that today.
You would hope too that NASA has kind of let them know before it's been released publicly.
Yeah, look, obviously they've already would have put it in their calendar and been briefed a bit on it, but definitely one of the more interesting things that will happen on the space station.
Well, another thing that you can do on the space station is possibly check out this asteroid that's coming and could quite possibly be captured by the gravitational pull of our tiny little planet.
2020 SO is a fairly new identified object. It will approach the Earth about 0.13 times the distance the moon is. That's relatively close. We're talking about tens of thousands of kilometers here. The origins of it are actually kind of being looked at, where it may actually not even be a natural body, but actually a rocket body from Surveyor 2.
Well, that is very cool. And another cool fact here is that if our gravitational pull does bring it in, it's likely to hang around in a little bit of a strange orbit, as we can see here on the YouTube video, between October and May next year.
Yeah, it will kind of zigzag in. So essentially, it doesn't have enough escape velocity to leave. So the Earth pulls it back in before kind of slingshotting it out. And one of the reasons people are wondering if this is not natural is because of how slow it's moving. And in fact, because it's moving relatively slow, that's the reason why it's going to be captured. Compared to the natural asteroid rocks that come and that are moving a lot faster than this one. So definitely an interesting one, but it doesn't look like it will hit. And even if it does, it is a small object.
Well, the one place that might be able to see this is our own mission control when it finally gets built. But it's all happening in this area called Lot 14 in Adelaide's CBD, and the Space Discovery Centre, the inspiration for the next generation, is now under construction.
Yeah, the development of the exhibits has been undergoing for quite a while now, and so now the physical building's getting ready And I still think they're looking at a launch or opening up of early next year, which will be exciting for people in Adelaide.
Talking Science, Stories of the Week.
And into our stories of the week, Brad. In a first, astronomers have detected a giant planet. I was going to say a gas giant, but it's a giant planet orbiting a dead star. It's kind of looking into the future for our own solar system.
Yeah, this planet is a big one when we talk about planets. So much bigger than Jupiter. The exciting thing, I think, here, as you said, is it's orbiting a white dwarf. And when things orbit white dwarfs, that's kind of a surprise. So a white dwarf is a star so it's undergone its red giant phase, so it's puffed out, something our sun will do in about 5 billion years. It's then shed those layers out and kind of blown them off out into space. And what's left is just the core, the stuff that really can't do much, what we call a white dwarf. Now, the critical point in all this is when that star expands in the red giant phase, it swells. So in our solar system, the sun will swallow Mercury, Venus, Earth. It's debated whether it will swallow Mars or stop somewhere near Mars. Either way, it'll get uncomfortably warm near Mars. The question is, how does this big planet, which does an orbit every 1.4 days, so a year on this planet's 1.4 days, so we're talking about way closer, 20 times closer than Mercury is to the sun. How is it still there when it should have been swallowed up?
Well, that's the question, Brad. What's the answer?
Well, look, I mean, there's a couple of different ideas. So one, probably the more likely, is this planet was further out. Now, as the star expands, obviously, so does, so to speak, its gravitational pull. Not quite, but obviously, if the surface of the star swells, it can pull and push things a bit differently because of its distribution of gravity and mass. So maybe that it actually, as it swelled and then started to shrink back again, it kind of started to pull it in, to almost use its gravity to bring it closer to the star. The other option, which is probably not as likely, is that actually this planet kind of survived this stage, that actually this planet was either bigger or had more stuff on it. Some of the outer layers were stripped or melted or blown away by this red giant phase and survived it. And therefore, it got left behind and survived, but just kind of got a bit of a heat scar.
Well, of course, the system that we're talking about is WD 1856, the planet WD 1856b. There could also be some other planets in the solar system as well, helping the gravitational dance, as it were, between planets and star.
Yeah, because the theory that as the star expanded, it would have disrupted the orbit of this massive, 14 times more massive than Jupiter planet. There could be other things out there, and their orbits also changed because of the expansion and contraction phase. And this white dwarf is a bit older. I think it's about 6 billion years old. What that means is that it could have done this quite a while ago, and over time the orbits change and more settle in. So there could be other ones out there. And look, people just didn't fully expect white dwarfs to have a lot of planets, especially planets that are really close. In a normal solar system, we'd call this a hot Jupiter. Hot Jupiters are being Jupiter-like planets, big planets that orbit super close to their stars, i.e. hot. They're relatively easy to find because you're looking at a big, quick dip. So we're looking at dips or transits in the light curve. When you get one every 1.4 days, you're going to see it a lot. So it's not surprising to find these, but it's surprising to find one around a white dwarf.
And Tess discovered this one just last year, so a recent discovery and one that is proving fascinating.
Yeah, Tess is Kepler's replacement, and one of its key capabilities is to take an image every 2 minutes. So you're literally looking at a whole bunch of stars every 2 minutes to look for these dips. So it's finding dips that are quicker. It's also finding dips or orbits that happen a lot quicker, because you can imagine with Kepler, it did most of it every 30 minutes. So at 1.4 days, you're only getting a couple of points every time when that planet transits. When you're taking it 2 minutes, you get 15 times more points. So you get a lot more data there. And it has a wider view, so we can look at more of these stars, so they can look at more of these white dwarfs and see what surprises they may house.
And it's information that we can learn and pass on to the future generations, so long as the species survives another couple of billion years.
Yeah, look, we have to be in it for the long haul, but it's an interesting view into our own solar system future.
Brad, next up this week, a game show is coming where you can win the ultimate prize of a SpaceX trip to the International Space Station. This one sounds like it's up our alley.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. We talked about when Tom Cruise was in talks, or still talking, I guess, about shooting a movie in space. And not surprisingly, that in 2023, there may be a trip to the space station that is the grand prize of a new reality television show. I think it's called Space Hero is the working title. I guess Survivor Outer Space was probably a bit too much.
Well, Deadline's reporting this story, so it must have some basis in reality, even though it sounds really far-fetched. But apparently the production company behind the show, as you say, called Space Hero, working title at the moment, has booked a seat on a Dragon crew capsule set to make the trip in 2023. So it's happening, and I guess... Well, it's happening at the moment, and I guess it's going to be an interesting worldwide appeal for this one.
It is. Look, we've talked about private people being able to book it. It's not out of the scope that a reality television show could book a seat, with SpaceX taking rides and Axiom Space doing it. The biggest trip is did SpaceX support it? Who can take the ride? Did Axiom Space? So this is the private kind of space group for tourism. And private astronauts who we've talked about before. Do they support it and work with it? Which they do. And what about NASA as well, who will be involved to a certain degree, who I think view it as at least there's interesting angles for STEM education and reaching different audiences, like lots of things, like the Tom Cruise movie. Just as we were talking about with the commercial, the views of it have changed, and making it elitist isn't the right word, but more accessible to a wider range of the population, which isn't a bad thing if this is how space is evolving to. And look, you can immediately imagine that there's two shows here at the very least. I can. There's the competition reality television show, whoever wins, but then you're going to also have to do the training and all that sort of stuff. So you can see someone following the training and all that sort of stuff, and obviously then being on board. So obviously there's a lot to gain and a lot to view in terms of public interest, if done the right way. Isn't the right word here, but with a bit of more of that entertainment aspect in mind that a production company could bring. They could definitely pull it off.
And it's an interesting idea as well in terms of the competition that's going to be held to work out who the winner is, because early reports are suggesting that it's not going to be a quiz show or anything like that. It's more going to be physical challenges, puzzles, problem-solving tasks. So the things that they need to do to contribute to the space station community when they're on board for 10 days, because I think that's the biggest thing that might get lost here a little bit with more private people going to the space station. Not as many scientists and astronauts. Sort of lose the fact that it is a working space station. It's a working science laboratory in orbit. It's not cheap to stay there, so you've got to pull your weight when you get up there.
That's exactly right. They have to do things. It's not just a holiday. It's a working holiday. So you have to be able to do some things. So it is kind of akin to what we'll call quote unquote a real astronaut would have to go through or test and do the trials and then training. So completely in the realm of what's possible. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept, and it'll be interesting to see people are for or against. And if you look at things like Survivor, yes, there's added drama, but I think there'll be a lot of just unique drama and experiences that will come through in the television show that the general audience will enjoy.
And I do wonder, Brad, if the people that had the original idea for the space station 30 years ago, 25 years ago, would have ever thought that these sort of programs would be created, these sort of people would be coming to the space station, and I wonder what they think of it now.
Definitely an evolution and the views of those sorts of things, and but I'd also say just generally space has changed. You didn't expect private companies to be playing a role. You didn't expect the U.S. to be reliant on a private company to send their astronauts into space. or the Russians. It's evolved so quickly and will keep evolving. It'll be interesting to see what happens over time.
You can get social with Trekzone. Australia's unofficial home of Star Trek is everywhere you are. Just search for Trekzone.
Brad, last up this week, this is very cool. We're back home. We're launching rockets from the remote Aboriginal community of Coonibba.
Yeah, this was done by Southern Launch, one of these private companies trying to do private rocket launches from Australia. Now, obviously, just firstly, this isn't a giant rocket as you'll see, but this rocket, it doesn't look that big, but this rocket is capable of eventually reaching, and their system is of reaching the technical definition of space, about 100 kilometers. So this isn't just simply a toy rocket. Toy rockets do not go that high. The hobby rockets do not go that high. So there's actually a lot of work here in this small version. Even the Falcon 9 wasn't that big when it started, and it is really cool to see them pull this off. They had a first attempt that didn't go fully according to plan, and also, as with other companies being set up in Australia, working with the traditional owners of the community that they're working on.
And we have talked in the past, Brad, about the advantages of launching from northern Australia being so close to the equator. There are advantages to launching on the South Australian coast as well, aren't there?
That's right. We forget one of the benefits Australia has is we're big and we can go closer to the equator, and we can go closer to the poles. Obviously, we're still pretty far away from the South Pole, but launching from almost 40 degrees latitude, not quite, is a lot different than launching from 20 or 30. And, the South Pole, everything's away from the South Pole, especially Northern Hemisphere locations. So it's a lot better than anything else that you can do, because even the other places set up in the Southern Hemisphere are more equatorial, like French Guiana. So it's definitely a benefit from launching in the South that people have identified. And like with everything, we have lots of remote places that you can do this from.
And I wanted to touch on that there as well. Obviously, we're not launching into a polar orbit or anything like that just yet. We're proving a concept here. Southern Launch getting up pretty much to space on Saturday with a 34-metre long, 34-kilogram rocket. But that wasn't the only achievement for them on that day. They backed it up with another rocket launch just a couple of hours later.
One was there were a rollover from Tuesday where they had a problem with the ignition, and they were obviously trying to test different things, with one rocket actually reaching 85 kilometers, which starts to put you into the legal boundary of space, and they have to get approval to reach those heights from the space agency, all that sort of stuff. And so, 34 meters isn't tall when you compare it to, some of the other giant ones that have been launched. But 3.4 meters goes a long way in terms of some of the cool science that you can do.
And it's our first private space rocket launch, which I think is just incredible.
That's the key here. This is the highest, biggest commercial launch. Everything else has been government or whatever, but it's a company set up in Australia, designed in Australia. The rocket was built, assembled, and the rocket was built with off-the-shelf parts a bit. And this is, again, one of the goals that they were going for. I think some people were wondering what this actually means, and what we're trying to show is that you can build using cheap, simple equipment. Well, relatively cheap, relatively simple. It's not, but you're not going through this whole Saturn V development. You can do these things and start reaching it and getting what we call sovereign launch capability. And it's a very small step, but it's a very important step on the road to what Australia wants to do.
And the rocket contained a payload which was deployed to gather information on the edge of space to help the development of our satellite technology, and I guess looking at downrange capabilities and just assessing everything, really. The first one really is, can it be done? How will it be done? We've done that step now, and now we can pave the way for future launches.
Yeah, look, you have to start in baby steps. You have to crawl before you can walk, so to speak. And this was, as you said, a payload or a test payload for the Air Force. And they've been doing a lot of it. And this is all what it's been about, in previous terms, to have equipment, whether it's commercial or government or military or whatever. You'd either have to go to an overseas partner, even just to test it and test launch it. By bringing these things closer to home, A, it becomes cheaper for the customer, i.e. in this case, the Air Force, but B, then that money eventually just still stays in Australia. And it's pretty simple economics how that works and why there's that benefit there. And you're not reliant on another group launching your stuff for you. So all of these little things are little successes on a big way.
Absolutely. And Federal Defence Industry Minister Melissa Price said that this launch formed part of the RAAF's Plan Jericho, which is an advanced sensing program to detect and track challenging targets. This is the sort of thing that you really don't want to outsource to anyone else to launch who could possibly sneak a look and possibly work out what we're doing. I mean, not likely, but anything's possible on transit in these payloads and that sort of stuff. So having this sovereign launch capability is really going to boost Australia into the future.
Yeah, and that's the exact point, is there are just certain things where this is critical infrastructure, and when you're reliant on other people to build it, design it, test it, launch it, operate, whatever for you, that's just not sensible. And the name of the game here is trying to get that going. And, we'll see these developments. You've talked about Gilmore Space before, and these things are happening faster and faster. And we'll see more and more of them being able to be done. And it's not a far off time before just entire satellites are built and launched from Australia completely in-house by different groups. And this was the whole purpose of the space agency, wasn't to build this big overarching NASA, but to find the ways of supporting, propping up, and accelerating the private companies already underway or wanting to be underway in Australia to directly benefit commercial and private enterprise.
And the last thing that I wanted to touch on here, and we mentioned it at the start of the story as well, but we truly appreciate and respect the traditional owners. It's fantastic that they are allowing us to launch from these beautiful areas and give us that access that we need, the prime real estate, if you will, of rocket launches.
I think this is just with Equatorial Launch Australia in the Northern Hemisphere and the groups in Alice Springs building receivers to track and receive information from satellites. It's working with the traditional owners and also finding ways of supporting those communities and making sure everyone in Australia benefits, and we can accelerate all of Australians, especially the traditional people, since it is their land, and doing cool things and working together on it. And I think that's a great view that is happening.
Absolutely, Brad. Well, it is fun to pick apart the stories of the week with you each and every week. Now back on Tuesdays, it feels good. It feels like we're back home.
Exactly.
And we will catch you again for another edition of Talkin' Science next Tuesday.
Thanks.